Nyarai lived in a small, quiet village surrounded by rolling hills and lush green fields. Her life was one of endless toil, her hands calloused from scrubbing floors and tending to the fields from dawn until dusk. Despite her hardships, there was a warmth in her heart that no amount of cruelty could extinguish. She was kind to everyone, even to those who mocked her ragged clothes or her simple ways. But kindness was not a trait her stepmother, Stepmother, valued. Stepmother was a woman consumed by envy. She had married Nyarai's father for his wealth, only to find herself disappointed when he passed away, leaving behind little more than a modest house and a few acres of farmland. Since then, she had turned her bitterness towards Nyarai, treating her more like a servant than a stepdaughter. Tariro, Stepmother's daughter, was the apple of her eye. Unlike Nyarai, Tariro was pampered and praised, her every whim indulged. While Nyarai slaved away, Tariro spent her days admiring herself in a cracked mirror, dreaming of a life of luxury. One evening, as the village buzzed with the golden hues of the setting sun, a crier from a neighboring village arrived on horseback. He carried with him news that set the entire village alight with excitement. A grand festival was to be held, and it was no ordinary celebration. The prince himself, Tao, would be present, seeking a bride among the maidens of the land. The crier spoke of music, dancing, and a chance for one fortunate young woman to win the prince's heart. Nyarai listened to the announcement with wide, hopeful eyes. She could hardly imagine such a grand event, let alone dream of attending. But as she lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of her tiny room, a spark of hope flickered in her heart. What if she could go? What if, even for one night, she could leave behind the drudgery of her life and be seen for who she truly was? Her hopes, however, were short-lived. The very next morning, as she timidly brought up the idea of attending the festival, Stepmother's laughter rang out, sharp and cruel. "You, at the festival? What a joke!" she sneered. "The prince would laugh you out of the hall before you even stepped inside." Tariro joined in, her laughter just as mocking. "Besides," Stepmother added with a smirk, "who would do the chores if you went off gallivanting?" Nyarai's heart sank, but she didn't argue. She knew better than to push Stepmother when she was in one of her foul moods. Instead, she kept her dream locked away, like a fragile bird in a cage. As the days passed and the festival drew closer, Nyarai threw herself into her work, her hands busy even as her mind wandered to the festivities she would never see. As the days grew closer to the festival, Stepmother's plans began to take shape. She saw this as an opportunity to secure a life of wealth and power through Tariro. If Tariro could catch the eye of the prince, their family's fortunes would change forever. Stepmother, cunning as ever, decided to spare no effort in making her daughter appear as the perfect bride. In the dead of night, she raided the locked chest that had once belonged to Nyarai's late mother. Inside were beautiful fabrics, delicate jewelry, and other treasures that Nyarai's father had kept safe for her future. Without hesitation, Stepmother took it all. She used the stolen wealth to craft a stunning outfit for Tariro, complete with golden bangles and an intricately embroidered dress that shimmered in the sunlight. Nyarai noticed the disappearance of her mother's belongings, but when she timidly inquired about them, Stepmother snapped, "Those things were wasted on you. They're being put to good use now." Tariro, delighted by her mother's attention, spent hours preening and practicing her walk in front of the mirror. Stepmother instructed her on how to speak gracefully, how to smile alluringly, and how to charm the prince. Meanwhile, Nyarai worked tirelessly to ensure everything was perfect for the festival preparations at home. She scrubbed the floors, polished the silverware, and even helped adjust the hem of Tariro's dress, all while dreaming silently of a chance to see the festivities herself. One evening, while cleaning, Nyarai mustered the courage to ask Stepmother if she could wear her simple dress and accompany them to the festival. Stepmother turned to her with a cold, calculating smile. "Of course, my dear. You'll attend in spirit," she said, mockingly. Nyarai's hopes lifted for a moment, only to be crushed when she saw the malicious glint in Stepmother's eyes. That night, While Nyarai slept, Maitemwa crept into her small room. She found the plain but lovingly stitched dress that Nyarai had hoped to wear. Without hesitation, Maitemwa tossed it into the hearth and watched as the flames consumed it. The next morning, when Nyarai discovered the ashes of her only dress, her heart broke. Maitemwa, feigning innocence, simply shrugged. "It must have been a careless accident," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. The day of the festival arrived, and the village was alive with excitement. Drums echoed in the distance, and the streets were filled with chatter and laughter. Nyarai, dressed in her tattered work clothes, watched longingly as Maitemwa and Tariro prepared to leave. Tariro looked like royalty, adorned in the stolen finery, her face glowing with anticipation. Maitemwa gave Nyarai one last sneer before stepping out the door. "Make sure the house is spotless when we return," she barked, slamming the door shut behind her. As the sounds of the festival faded into the distance, Nyarai sat alone on the steps of the house, tears streaming down her face. The world outside was bursting with joy and celebration, but inside, her heart felt heavy with despair. She had done everything for her family, yet here she was, left behind and forgotten. For the first time, Nyarai began to wonder if life would always be this way, a cycle of sacrifice and pain with no end in sight. Little did she know, her fate was about to take an unexpected turn. As Nyarai sat alone on the steps of her small home, the soft hum of festival drums carried faintly through the night air, a cruel reminder of the celebration she would never see. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thought about all the sacrifices she had made, all the dreams she had quietly buried to please a family that cared nothing for her happiness. The weight of her despair felt unbearable, and she lowered her head, letting the tears fall freely. "Why do you cry, child?" A voice, soft yet filled with wisdom, broke through the silence. Nyarai looked up, startled, to find an elderly woman standing before her. The woman's appearance was striking. Her silver hair shimmered in the moonlight, and her eyes held a knowing kindness that immediately eased Nyarai's heart. She was wrapped in a patchwork cloak, adorned with vibrant patterns that seemed to tell stories of their own. Who are you?" Nyarai asked, wiping her tears and rising to her feet. "I am Gogo Chipo," the woman replied with a gentle smile. "A friend of your late mother. I've watched over you from afar, and tonight, child, I've come to help you." Nyarai's heart skipped a beat at the mention of her mother. "You knew her?" "Truly?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Gogo Chipo nodded and stepped closer, placing a comforting hand on Nyarai's shoulder. "Your mother was a woman of great strength and kindness, much like you. She would never have wanted you to suffer as you have. Tonight, Nyarai, you will have the chance to show the world the light that burns within you." Nyarai looked down at her tattered clothes and dirt-streaked hands. "But how? I have nothing," she whispered, the weight of her circumstances heavy in her voice. Gogo Chipo chuckled softly and reached into her cloak, pulling out a delicate necklace. It was unlike anything Nyarai had ever seen, a pendant shaped like a crescent moon, glowing faintly as if infused with its own light. "This," Gogo Chipo said, holding up the necklace, "was your mother's. It carries the magic of hope and transformation. With it, you shall shine brighter than the stars." Nyarai hesitated, her mind swirling with doubt and wonder. "But what if they recognize me? What if I'm not meant to go?" she asked. Gogo Chipo placed the necklace gently around Nyarai's neck and smiled. "Have faith, child. The world has kept you hidden for too long. It is time for you to be seen." As soon as the necklace touched her skin, a warm, tingling sensation spread through Nyarai's body. Her simple, tattered dress shimmered and transformed into a gown of breathtaking beauty. Flowing fabric in shades of gold and deep blue, adorned with intricate embroidery that seemed to dance in the light. Her hair, once hastily tied back, now cascaded down her shoulders in soft waves, adorned with tiny, sparkling ornaments. Her bare feet were now encased in delicate sandals that gleamed like silver. Nyarai looked down at herself in astonishment. She hardly recognized the reflection she saw in the windowpane. "Is this really me?" she whispered. Gogo Chipo nodded, her eyes twinkling with pride. "It is who you've always been, my dear. Now go, and remember, return before the last drumbeat at midnight. The magic will fade, but the impression you leave will not." With her heart racing, Nyarai hurried toward the festival, her gown billowing behind her like a comet's tail. The village square was alive with music, laughter, and light. As she stepped into the crowd, heads turned, conversations paused, and all eyes fell on her. Whispers of admiration rippled through the air. Who was this radiant beauty who seemed to glow like the moon itself? Prince Tao, standing at the center of the square, was the first to notice her. His gaze locked onto hers, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to fade. Nyarai, feeling his eyes on her, hesitated, unsure of what to do. But as their eyes met, a strange sense of calm washed over her, as if she belonged in this moment. Tao approached her, his steps deliberate, his expression one of awe. "I don't believe we've met," he said, his voice warm and inviting. "May I have the honor of knowing your name?" Nyarai hesitated, remembering Gogo Chipo's warning to keep her identity hidden. "I am someone who has waited a long time to be here," she said softly, her voice carrying a mix of shyness and strength. The prince smiled, sensing there was more to her story, but choosing not to press. "Then may I have this dance?" he asked, extending his hand. Nyarai nodded, her heart pounding as she placed her hand in his. As they danced under the stars, Nyarai felt a joy she had never known. The world around her sparkled with magic, and for the first time in her life, she was seen, not as a servant or an afterthought, but as someone worthy of admiration and love. Little did she know, the night was only just beginning, and fate had far more in store for her than she could have imagined. The festival lights cast a warm glow over the square as Nyarai and Prince Tao swayed to the rhythm of the music. Around them, the crowd watched in silence, enchanted by the pair's effortless grace. Nyarai felt as though the world had stopped spinning, the weight of her daily struggles lifting with each step. Prince Tao's eyes never left hers, his expression softening with curiosity and admiration. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met," Tao said, his voice low and sincere. "There's a simplicity about you, a purity that feels refreshing." Nyarai smiled, though she hesitated to speak. Could she reveal anything about herself without risking the fragile magic that had brought her here? "I've spent most of my life in quiet places," she said carefully. "The trees, the rivers, and the animals. They've always been my sanctuary. They remind me that beauty exists, even in the harshest conditions." Her words hung in the air like a melody. Tao tilted his head slightly, intrigued. "You speak of nature as though it's a friend," he said. "It's rare to find someone who treasures it in that way." Nyarai laughed softly. "Perhaps it's because nature doesn't judge. It doesn't care who you are or where you come from. It simply exists. And in doing so, it teaches us to find peace." Tao's admiration deepened. In a sea of overly adorned and boastful women, this mysterious beauty stood apart, her soul radiating through every word she spoke. "Tell me," he asked, his tone turning more intimate. "What is it you dream of?" Her smile faltered for a moment, the weight of her reality creeping back into her thoughts. "To live a life of freedom," she said softly. "To not be bound by others' expectations or cruelty. To find a place where I can be myself." Tao stared at her, his heart stirring in a way he had never experienced before. He wanted to ask her more, to uncover every layer of her story. But before he could, the first drumbeat of midnight echoed through the square. Nyarai stiffened, her breath hitching as she realized the time. The warning from Gogo Chipo rang in her ears. She had to leave before the last drumbeat, or the magic would fade. I have to go, she said, pulling away from Tao's grasp. What? Wait, Tao called after her, his voice filled with urgency. I don't even know your name. But Nyarai was already slipping through the crowd, her golden gown shimmering like liquid light. She moved as fast as her feet would carry her, her heart pounding in her chest. Behind her, the prince tried to follow, but the throng of onlookers slowed his pursuit. As the final drumbeat resounded, Nyarai stumbled in her haste, and the enchanted necklace slipped from her neck, falling to the ground unnoticed. She managed to escape into the shadows just as the magic faded, her gown reverting to its tattered form. Breathing heavily, she clutched her chest and looked back at the distant lights of the festival, her heart aching at the thought of the connection she had just left behind. Meanwhile, Prince Tao stood in the middle of the square, the necklace clutched tightly in his hand. He turned it over, studying its intricate design, and felt a surge of determination. Whoever she was, this necklace was his only clue. He vowed to find her, no matter how long it took. Back at the festival, my Temwa fumed with frustration. Tariro's efforts to capture the prince's attention had been nothing short of disastrous. She had tried every trick her mother had taught her. Flattery, coy smiles, and exaggerated tales of her accomplishments. But the prince had barely glanced in her direction. Mai Temwa's plans were unraveling before her eyes. As the festivities wound down, rumors of the mysterious woman spread like wildfire. Villagers whispered about her otherworldly beauty and the spell she had cast over the prince. Mai Temwa's sharp mind began to piece things together, her suspicion growing with every whispered account. This isn't over, she muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing with determination. Whoever she is, I will find out the truth. But for now, Nyarai remained safely hidden, her heart torn between the magical evening she had experienced and the fear of what would come next. Little did she know, the prince's search for her would set in motion a chain of events that would change her life forever, and Mai Temwa's wrath would soon follow. The morning sun rose over the village, but for Nyarai, the light brought no comfort. She sat silently in her small, dim room, her heart heavy with memories of the previous night. The prince's face, his warm eyes, and the connection they shared lingered in her thoughts, yet the reality of her life chained her to despair. She knew Mai Temwa's wrath was inevitable, but she had not anticipated the depth of her stepmother's cruelty. At the palace, Prince Tao stood before his advisors, clutching the delicate necklace. Its intricate design shimmered in the daylight, and he felt certain it held the key to finding the woman who had stolen his heart. He announced his intention to search every corner of the kingdom to find her, determined to return the necklace to its rightful owner. The news of the prince's quest spread quickly, reaching every corner of the village. Mai Temwa, already stewing in suspicion, pieced the story together with growing dread. The necklace, the prince's infatuation, and the mysterious woman at the festival, it all pointed to Nyarai. Her fists clenched as she realized the stakes. If the prince found out the truth, it would mean the end of her ambitions and the humiliation of Tariro. Summoning Tariro to her side, Mai Temwa hatched a plan. We must act quickly, she said, her voice sharp with urgency. The prince is searching for the woman who wore this necklace. We will claim that it belongs to you. But mother, Tariro protested, her tone uncertain. What if he finds out? He won't, Mai Temwa snapped, her eyes blazing with determination. Nyarai will not get the chance to speak. Leave her to me. That evening, Mai Temwa confronted Nyarai with a cold smile that sent shivers down her spine. So, you think you can outshine my daughter, do you? She hissed. You think you can steal what belongs to Tariro? Nyarai stared at her stepmother, confusion and fear swirling in her chest. I don't understand. Enough! Mai Temwa cut her off. I know it was you at the festival, You dare to shame this family with your deceit? Before Nyarai could defend herself, Maitemwa's men seized her and dragged her to a small hidden shed at the edge of the property. The door slammed shut behind her, the sound of the lock echoing in the silence. You will stay here until this matter is resolved, Maitemwa declared, her voice icy. And if you so much as whisper the truth to anyone, you'll regret it. Tears streamed down Nyarai's face as she pounded on the door, but her cries went unanswered. Alone and terrified, she sank to the floor, clutching her knees as despair threatened to consume her. Meanwhile, Maitemwa made her move. She approached the prince under the guise of a concerned and helpful villager. "Your Highness," she said, bowing deeply, "I hear you are searching for the owner of this necklace. I believe I can help." Tao's eyes lit up with hope. "You know who it belongs to?" Maitemwa nodded solemnly. "It is my daughter, Tariro. She wore it at the festival, though she is too shy to come forward. I can bring her to you, but I must ask for your generosity in return. My family has struggled greatly, and it would be an honor to see my daughter rise to her rightful place." Tao hesitated, his heart uneasy. Something about Maitemwa's demeanor felt off, but his desire to find the woman outweighed his doubts. "Very well," he said, "but I must meet her before making any promises." Maitemwa's smile widened, though it did little to mask the malice in her eyes. "Of course, Your Highness. I will bring her to the palace tomorrow." As night fell, Nyarai sat in her prison, her mind racing. She had overheard bits of conversation through the walls and realized Maitemwa's plan. The thought of Tariro claiming the prince's affection filled her with despair, but more than that, it ignited a spark of defiance. She had come too far, endured too much, to let her stepmother's lies destroy her chance at happiness. With her hands trembling, Nyarai examined her surroundings, searching for a way to escape. The shed was sturdy, but years of neglect had left gaps in the wooden walls. She peered through one of the openings, spotting a faint light in the distance. It was her only hope. As she began to work on loosening one of the planks, she whispered a silent prayer for strength. The memory of the prince's kindness and the possibility of a better future gave her the courage to act. She would not let Maitemwa's betrayal define her fate. The following morning, the palace was alive with anticipation. Word had spread that Maitemwa would present Tariro as the owner of the enchanted necklace, and villagers gathered to witness the prince's decision. Among them, whispers of doubt began to circulate, as those who had seen Nyarai at the festival started to piece together the truth. Inside the palace, Prince Tao sat on his ornate throne, the necklace gleaming in his hands. His mind was restless, plagued by the nagging feeling that something was amiss. Just as Maitemwa and Tariro were about to enter the hall, a sudden commotion erupted at the palace gates. Gogo Chippo, the mysterious elderly woman who had aided Nyarai, appeared. She moved with an air of authority, her staff tapping rhythmically against the stone floor. The guards hesitated to stop her, sensing an aura of power surrounding her. With a commanding tone, she announced, "I have urgent news for the prince. News that will reveal the truth about the woman he seeks." The prince, intrigued by her presence, ordered her to be brought before him. Maitemwa and Tariro froze in their tracks, their confident facade faltering. Gogo Chipo stepped into the hall, her gaze piercing as it swept over the gathered crowd. "Your Highness," she began, bowing respectfully, "the woman you seek has been hidden from you, but the necklace you hold carries the truth." With a wave of her hand, the room grew silent, and the necklace began to glow with a soft golden light. The prince watched in awe as the light expanded, forming a shimmering vision. The crowd gasped as scenes from the festival appeared. Nyarai, transformed by the necklace's magic, dancing with the prince, her radiant smile captivating everyone. The vision shifted, showing Maitemwa plotting to keep Nyarai away and imprisoning her to silence her. Maitemwa's face turned pale as the truth unfolded before the crowd. Tariro clutched her mother's arm, trembling with fear. The villagers murmured in shock and outrage, their suspicions confirmed. The prince rose from his throne, his voice thunderous with anger. You dared to deceive me, to imprison an innocent woman for your own gain. He turned to Maitemwa, his gaze like fire. You will answer for your actions. Maitemwa fell to her knees, her previous arrogance replaced with desperation. Your Highness, please. I only wanted the best for my daughter, she pleaded, her voice shaking. But the prince was unmoved. Your greed and cruelty have caused enough harm. You and your daughter are no longer welcome in this village. As the guards stepped forward to escort Maitemwa and Tariro away, Tariro broke into tears. Mother, why did you do this? We could have had a better life without all these lies. But Maitemwa remained silent, her face a mask of defeat. With the schemers removed, the prince turned to Gogo Chipo. Where is Nyarai now? He asked, his voice softening. Gogo Chipo smiled knowingly. She is nearby, Your Highness, but her heart is weary. She fears that her truth may not be enough. The prince's expression softened further. Bring her to me, he said. As if on cue, the palace doors opened, and Nyarai stepped inside, her head held high despite the tears in her eyes. She had escaped her confinement with Gogo Chipo's help, and now stood before the crowd, her natural beauty and grace undeniable. The prince approached her, holding out the necklace. This belongs to you, he said gently. I knew from the moment we met that you were different, that you were genuine. It was never about the necklace. It was about you. Tears streamed down Nyarai's face as she accepted the necklace. I never meant to deceive you, she said, her voice trembling. I only wanted a chance to be seen for who I truly am. You have always been seen, the prince replied, taking her hand. And now, everyone knows the truth. The crowd erupted into cheers, their joy washing away the bitterness of the betrayal. Villagers, who had once ignored Nyarai, now celebrated her, apologizing for their blindness and promising to support her. As the sun set, the prince announced his intentions to marry Nyarai, declaring that her courage and kindness had captured his heart. The village celebrated late into the night, their newfound unity symbolized by the couple's love. And as for Maitemwa and Tariro, they left the village in disgrace, their schemes having brought about their own downfall. The tale of Nyarai's resilience and the prince's unwavering search for truth became a legend, a reminder that no matter how deep the shadows of betrayal, the light of honesty and love would always prevail. The morning after Maitemwa and Tariro's departure, the village seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. For Nyarai, it was the dawn of a new chapter. With the burden of her stepmother's cruelty lifted, she finally felt free to embrace the life her mother had always wished for her. The first step was to reclaim her late mother's legacy. With the villagers rallying around her, she returned to the small plot of land her mother had left behind. Overgrown and neglected for years, it now seemed to hum with potential. Nyarai worked tirelessly, planting seeds both in the soil and in her heart, seeds of hope, resilience, and renewal. Prince Tao visited often, not as a royal imposing his presence, but as an equal who admired her strength and determination. Together, they walked through the fields, sharing dreams of the future. Nyarai spoke of turning the land into a thriving garden that would benefit the entire village, and Tao listened intently, offering his support. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, the prince knelt before Nyarai in the very garden she had begun to rebuild. Holding out a ring crafted from gold and adorned with a single emerald, he said, Nyarai, your courage, kindness, and unwavering spirit have shown me what true beauty is. I don't ask this as a prince, but as a man deeply in love with you. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears welled up in Nyarai's eyes as she nodded, unable to find the words to express her joy. The villagers, who had gathered in secret at the prince's request, erupted into cheers, their voices carrying the news across the fields. Preparations for the wedding began immediately, and the entire village came together to celebrate the union. The once divided community now felt more united than ever, with Nyarai's story serving as a testament to the power of resilience and love. The day of the wedding was a spectacle of joy and tradition. The village square was transformed into a vibrant celebration, adorned with colourful fabrics, flowers, and lanterns that swayed gently in the breeze. Nyarai, dressed in a gown that shimmered like the stars, walked down the aisle with a grace that left everyone breathless. Prince Tao, waiting for her at the altar, couldn't take his eyes off her. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, and they exchanged vows that spoke of partnership, love, and a shared vision for a brighter future. As the ceremony concluded, Gogo Chipo appeared once more, her presence commanding yet comforting. She stepped forward, raising her staff high as she blessed the couple. May your love be as enduring as the mountains and as boundless as the sky. Together, you shall bring prosperity, not just to each other, but to all who surround you. With that, she turned and began to walk away, her figure disappearing into the crowd. Some claimed they saw her vanish into thin air, while others believed she simply blended into the throng of well-wishers. Whatever the truth, her departure left behind an air of mystery, a reminder that her role in Nyarai's journey was as magical as it was profound. The celebration continued long into the night, with laughter, music, and dancing filling the air. The villagers, who had once overlooked Nyarai's struggles, now toasted to her strength and the happiness she had found. For the first time in years, the village felt alive with hope and unity. As the stars dotted the sky and the world seemed to pause in the perfection of the moment, Nyarai and Tao stood together, gazing out over the village. "This is only the beginning," Nyarai said softly, her voice filled with determination. "And I can't wait to see where it takes us," Tao replied, wrapping his arm around her. Hand in hand, they stepped into their new life, ready to face whatever challenges and joys the future held. Their love had been tested by betrayal and hardship, but in the end, it had emerged stronger, a beacon of light for all who knew their story. And so, the tale of Nyarai and Prince Tao became a cherished legend in the village, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope and love could prevail, leading to a future filled with endless possibilities.